talking about. TeleSploit is a both commercial and open source solution, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today on the Pwn School Livecast. So for those outside of the local community that I don't interact with, and here goes my CPU, I'm Wirefall. I'm DHA Hole on Twitter. In addition to being the chief consultant at TeleSploit, I'm also the primary developer of both the commercial and open source solution. Phil mentioned founded the Dallas Hackers Association, I believe next month, which is canceled, unfortunately, due to current events. Was to be our 7th year anniversary. Luckily, one of our local members who can't attend very often because of constant travel, Rainmaker, has started last year a meetup called Fire Talks Online. That's what they are on Twitter, at Fire Talks Online. And it was for those who couldn't be involved in the local community but still wanted that Fire Talk quick hit of information, but online. So he has agreed, in lieu of DHA, to host Fire Talks Online on the same date as DHA was scheduled to be. So the first Wednesday of next month, which is April 1st. So it should be a really good show with all the April Fool's jokes.
That's cool.
I'm on the board of our local B-Sides. Go ahead.
Yeah, Wirefall. I was just going to say, since you are mentioning DHA and streaming and all that, there is a question in the Q&A if DHA will get a streaming service.
Sorry, Duncan, have you been drinking? No, you're coming across very slurred. Can you repeat that?
Yeah, I'm on a 4G, but there's a question in the Q&A asking if DHA will get a streaming service.
Never. No. That's just not something. We have a strict policy of no photos, no video, no recording. We encourage participation from all aspects of the community. Legitimate white hat, whatever you want to call them, penetration testers by day, as well as those who may not be as above board. We're all there to share information, and unfortunately, some of that information likely would not be shared if it was not just a local event. Thank you for
Perfect.
that. Yeah, any questions that come up, you or Phil, please jump in. I can't see as I'm presenting this, I can't see the chat, so feel free to jump in at any time. Very involved in the local community, board member besides DFW, as Phil said, within this community. I, in other circumstances, attend 6 to 8 meetups a month. Definitely already start feeling the withdrawals. Thank you very much, Phil, for doing this, allowing us to continue on, even if just remotely. I've been in some things. The Art of Intrusion is amusing because I share a chapter with Mudge. He sets the bar very, very high, chapter 6, which Mitnick called Penetration Testing and Other Follies. He wasn't a big fan at the time. I think that's probably changed now. The Tribe of Hackers books, Red Team, is out. It's been out a while. Phil Wiley is in that as well. Definitely pick up a copy of that. Basically, the same questions asked to all of the contributors, and you can see a wide range of responses on how people got into the industry, what they think of the industry, and what they recommend people do trying to get into the industry. Next month, I believe it's April 6th, Tribe of Hackers Security Leaders will be dropping. I'll be in that as well. We have some local folks in that too. Anyway, I've been, what TeleSploit is basically a Dropbox. It allows you to do internal assessments remotely. I've been developing these for about 8 years. The initial ones were strictly surreptitious, so it was to complement a physical entry social engineering engagement, sneak in, place a device on the network, get out and access remotely. These were, because they were surreptitious, there were a couple of things that were different than what you're going to deal with on a normal pen test. One was covertness. So I was using at the time a Hack 5 Hack 5 Wi-Fi Pineapple Mark II, hidden inside of a copier surge suppressor. So you go find a copier, you plug it, you rip out the insides out of that, put the Dropbox in, plug it in between the copier, plug the Ethernet in between the copier, and now you're in line. It also had 3G out. That was really unique in the time, and we leveraged those lessons in the TeleSploit commercial version. So you have an out-of-band connection as well. It really, the whole solution was created because there was a need for this type of platform by penetration testers. One, the covertness, but also the second we'll go into a little bit later. I spent, when I started developing these, it was about a little over a decade, almost constantly on the road. Burnout is a real issue. So this is one of the things that tries to eliminate. So what you get from the open source and the commercial version is the lessons that we've learned from lots and lots of these deployments. You can build all this all yourself. It's not rocket science. But we've had lots of deployments. We've provided training where we're setting these up and interacting with students and finding their pain points and building solutions into the whole platform. So you definitely get, can't say we've seen everything, but we have seen quite a bit. Any questions before we move on there? Okay. So what is this platform, TeleSploit Open Source? It consists of 3 primary pieces. You have the server, that's what's going to be deployed within the environment. The relay, which is in the cloud, that's what the server and the client are going to interact with to be able to communicate together. And in the client, wherever you're sitting, it's basically to mirror as if you were sitting directly at the server. So you could be on your laptop, on a desktop, on your mobile phone, anywhere in the world. For our server, it supports Intel and ARM. Those who attended my local North Texas ISSA cybersecurity conference training this past year, we had 75 Raspberry Pis all set up at once. And so it definitely supports Raspberry Pi. That was built on that training, and all of the previous versions were built strictly on Kali 2019, whatever, 1, 2, 3, or 4. A big change came about with 2020.1 in that by default you are no longer root. You create an unprivileged user at creation time, and the root account is locked. So was not sure how this would affect the deployment. Part of this, preparing for this talk, was learning that, because I'm not going to give you scripts to download from the GitHub that you can only run on an old version of Kali that you can't download directly from the repository anymore. So this will now work with 2020.1 with one simple exception, and that is you have to unlock root, and we'll talk about how to do that. The server has a USB flash drive in it. We recommend a very small nub because it has to stay attached to it for it to operate as a TeleSploit server. The purpose of that is when the device boots, it creates a bunch of logs, collects a bunch of data as it boots up network data, and dumps that into a log file that is then GPG encrypted and placed on the USB. So if you deploy this and it does not come up on your relay, you can have the client pull that USB and send you those logs for you to decrypt and view the data. It also stores the dynamic configuration files. And this is one of the big differentiators from just like sending a laptop. Everybody's developed a remote solution, but usually it's very, very slow. So if, not really if, but when something goes wrong, when the client provides you with the wrong IP address information, you're dead in the water. Now with this, what you can do is get the correct information from the client, which you may have already discovered by reviewing the logs that they've provided, update the configuration, GPG encrypt it, and send those GPG encrypted files to the client to place on that USB to plug back in, reboot, and now you're good to go.
Wirefall.
It does.
Can I interject, please? There's a question whether or not we're supposed to be on your title slide. We're on slide 1 in the presentation.
I do not know why it's not following. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Let me escape out of here. I've been going on, so can you see slide 2 there now, introduction?
We can, yes, thank you.
Okay, so this is what I was talking about last time. For some reason, presentation mode is not advancing the slides. It is for me, but not for you. So this was just the intro. At DHA hole, all of the lessons learned. Where I was going here was talking about the server, relay, and client. So the server, right now, we talked about the Intel, ARM, Kali, the USB. Right now, it does require an Ethernet connection. Anyone who was at the North Texas ISSA training knows that that's not required. All of those 75 Raspberry Pis were connecting wirelessly. That was a highly customized environment specifically for that training. The expectation, though, is that that will be part of the code base next month. We'll be updating that so you can actually run your Dropbox off wireless if you desire. Since really the whole purpose of this is performing full-fledged penetration tests, we still recommend going Ethernet, but it will be an option to go Wi-Fi. So the server provides services as this is exactly what you're using it for. You have a console, just as if you were sitting with an SSH shell locally on the network. You get a full desktop through VNC. There is a Squid web proxy running on it. So if you have an application like, let's say, Burp Suite on your local client, your laptop, you can use these tunnels to run all of those tests through the tunnels, through the Squid proxy, and into that local environment. So you don't actually need to install that, let's say, on the server and then VNC and control it remotely. You can just use your tools natively on your local laptop. It does also include a SOX proxy. This has to be manually configured. All the others are automatically configured and run on boot. The SOX proxy has to be manually configured because you need a SOX target. As far as where I've used this primarily is in database testing. I really like the database client Squirrel SQL, so I have that installed on my client. If I find a database and get credentials, I can now set up a SOX proxy on the server to connect directly to the database, and then I connect to the tunnel that it's created, and I can run my Squirrel SQL client from my laptop through the tunnels, through the server, to the database. Now the relay, everything depends on the relay. It brokers all the connections. So the server connects to the relay. It creates all of these reverse SSH tunnels that are proxied through SSL TLS, so over port 443. This is less frequently blocked by clients. It's all outbound, so there's no inbound traffic to it. The outbound is through those TLS connections. If they're breaking those connections, we'll talk about a little later what happens there. But really, all it requires outbound is SSL TLS. The relay is cloud-based. We'll be showing AWS, but theoretically, you could use any relay that you did with DigitalOcean or Google or Azure or whatever you'd like. The relay script is built on Ubuntu 18.04. It may or may not work with other releases. Everything is secured, whether it's through the TLS connection, the SSH connection. We have the script auto perform a Let's Encrypt certificate request. And then there are shared services as well on the relay. So the server is providing your services within the testing environment. So you're going to do Nmap, Nessus, whatever you do in that environment. But there's some services that are available on the relay as well for anybody who can authenticate through their SSH, that have been provisioned with their SSH keys. And that's chat and collaboration. So Mattermost is a Slack type alternative, open source Slack type alternative. Some of the interesting things we've seen with chat, I've created scripts that will basically wrap an Nmap scan. So as it runs, the output you normally see that you're waiting on, like how many hosts are up, how much completion is done, will auto post up to a chat room. So you can just open your chat app and see where the scan progress is. The collaboration, one of the main purposes for this is you can provision, let's say, just the testers on the server, but you can provision the testers and your project managers on the relay. And so you can collaborate, the testers can collaborate with what they're finding within the environment, and the project managers can collaborate with the testers, but wouldn't have access to the server. As I brought up previously, the clients, we do have setup scripts for Linux and Mac. We'll do a live demo of that. Windows client is available. It uses Kitty, which is a fork of PuTTY. And then this runs, all it really requires is an SSH-enabled client. So we've run this on Androids, iPhones, you name it. So you now can become portable. And one of the advantages of that really is, let's say you're running a scan, but it's not current times, and you can go out to dinner or go out to a local meetup, and there's an issue. You're bringing down some service. Are you able to access your home from where you are with what you have? Are you able to access theirs? Probably not. With this, you could just bring up the application on your phone, stop the scan, and then continue enjoying your evening. Wait for the fallout tomorrow. Any questions before we move on? Okay. So there are some differences. The open source, I'd like to reiterate, is fully functional. This will allow you to do penetration testing of an internal resource from anywhere in the world. So it is fully viable. There are some differences, though. On a commercial version, it's really a white glove service. We take care of everything. So we perform all maintenance, shipping. We support the client when they can't figure out the difference between an Ethernet cable and a telephone cable. That's happened. We also provide these dedicated relay servers. They're all off of the telesploit.com domain, so they're a subdomain of that. We provision the SSH keys onto the server and the relay. So basically, as a customer, you would say, I have a pen test in Kazakhstan in 3 weeks, and these are the people, the SSH public keys of the people I want testing. And prior to that start date, the server would be on site, the people would be provisioned, and they can start testing day one. We do have the ability to access multiple deployments with this. There's unique tunnels built, the tunnel assignments built for each deployment. So you could basically be sitting at your laptop testing multiple clients or the same client with multiple locations, all from your laptop. They are shipped with self-decrypting LUKS partitions. So the drives are the drive other than the boot sector is the boot partition are all LUKS encrypted. They decrypt by inserting an SD card that has UDEV random data on it, that it looks for specific pieces of it to create a key to decrypt those drives. What we do there is, if we can include the SD card with the shipment, which is the primary. There's really, shipping from here to New Hampshire, very little chance that in transit it's going to be tampered with. Still, they would have to understand how the key was derived, and it would be a very advanced attack. Now, we can ship the key separately, so now it's just a direct attack on the LUKS encryption, and we use 60-plus character passphrases, so even with supercomputing and GPUs, good luck. Or there's the option, we can ship the device, never ship an SD card other than a blank one, and the client, we can provide an image for download that the client can then image onto that for very high risk, let's say going across borders to somewhere that you would be concerned about the device being intercepted and tampered with. As well, for troubleshooting, every deployment comes with out-of-band cellular access. There's a 3G modem included. Now, I mentioned before the USBs, you can dynamically create updates and send them to the client, but that does still require their interaction. They have to pull it out, put the new ones on, put it back, reboot, and then it's a guesswork. Did it work or not? Send us back the logs. It's very interactive, very step-by-step. The cellular, they just plug in the cellular modem, reboot, and we would then have out-of-band access. Also, we offer a option where we provide a Windows VM with the deployment that's been weaponized with FireEye's Commando VM. So if you're wanting to use your Windows tools natively, locally in the environment, that's possible. Now, what the open source brings is, you have, like I said, you have all of those, you have all the capabilities that you need to do a penetration test or a security assessment, database assessment, web application assessment, whatever you're doing. But the configuration and deployment is your responsibility. You have to configure the relay, which we'll walk through. It's very easy. All of this is very easy. We'll walk through every step. You do have to own a domain. This is, like I said, we use Let's Encrypt, and everything is authenticated to that, so you need to be able to configure your DNS to add a subdomain. By default, I mentioned the commercial version, you can support multiple deployments. By default, this one uses the same ports for every single one. So you would only be able to have one server talk to one relay. And if you were on a client, you could only connect to one server at a time. You'll see the configuration files. You can change them yourself. And this is not a limitation. It's just how it's provided. The drives are unencrypted, if that's a concern for you. So there is no LUKS encryption on them. And that dynamic configuration, there is no cellular out-of-band access, so it's USB only. You have to provide the updates to the customer to put on the USB if there is a problem. Any questions before moving on? Okay. So why would you use this? What are the purposes? And I mentioned in the very beginning, burnout, reducing the burnout because of travel. There was at one point in time, a year and a half, where every Sunday night I flew out. It was actually afternoon, flew out. Every Friday night I got back. So there's Saturday to do laundry, say hi to the family, and then turn around and leave.
That sucks,
right
man.
now,
I've been there.
Yeah, and that was over a decade ago. Now security is so hot, resources are so in demand, you're not going to keep people if that's what you're doing to them. Also, it reduces the overall travel costs, so you can offer that as a benefit to your customers. That year and a half was from here in Dallas to the Bay Area in California. That's a lot of lost billable time, where I'm not billing, I'm just traveling. So the minimizes that non-billable time, and that itself will increase utilization because you can now bill during those hours. But also there's the opportunity where historically a lot of places will have one tester doing multiple external pen tests at one time. Cycling through those, maybe one's in a documentation phase, one's in a scanning, one's in an exploitation. You can multi process there and serve multiple engagements. Internally, that hasn't been the case. If you're on site, you're but sitting there. So this now you can actually treat it like an external. You can assign one person to multiple internals. They can be testing at the same time. This doesn't have to eliminate travel, though. If you still want to go on site, after we're traveling again, and have that face-to-face with the customer, that's very important. And if this is a customer you want to build that rapport with, you don't have that yet, maximize that on-site time. So send one of these, your TeleSploit Open Source out 2 weeks before. Have them install it. Start doing your reconnaissance, or have that handled by a junior, and identify your targets. Identify the technologies they're using prior to your arrival. If you find something unique that you're not familiar with, then instead of later being in a hotel trying to research it and set up a ad hoc lab to see if you can attack it, you're using your full resources in your home office or your work office. And you're going to be collecting hashes. You capture all the Wi-Fi handshakes, WPA2 handshakes, do your responder, start cracking before you arrive, so that when you do step on the premises day one, you're most likely already domain admin. So it definitely looks very impressive. Some other things that you can do with a solution that weren't necessarily possible if you're sitting there is offering a low and slow simulation. Nobody is going to pay you, or I have yet to find a client that is willing to pay me to sit there for 6 months going very low and slow, trying to evade their detection, and how an advanced adversary would look at their network. Well, now you could send your open source device, TeleSploit open source device, to the customer and say, plug this in, and over the next 6 months, we'll spend 40 hours total level of effort over that 6 months doing very passive, slow recon. So for your more advanced customers that really want that APT mimicking. Or maybe they want to test their blue team. So it's kind of like a Where's Waldo. They put it in and move it around, and you do a little bit here and there, see what you can accomplish without the blue team noticing. And even if you do go on site for the full assessment, a lot of clients will want a retest, or your product comes with a retest as part of the statement of work. This is typically maybe a day or two of work. That maybe you do the full test on site, but for the retest, you send them out a device, because it's not worth flying out 4 hours each way just for 1 day of work. And then the one where I get really excited is this greater flexibility. A lot of people are really in on the red teaming, and then that's what they talk about, that's what they're pushing, and then they send out one person that sits there for a week. And that's not my idea of a red team. First of all, a team of one is only the Army. But the greater flexibility now allows you to do, let's say, that recon. You find out all of the environments, and you hand off all the databases to your database expert. You hand off all the web apps, or let's say just a specific thing of Java deserialization. You have an expert on that. All the findings that include that vulnerability, you send off to them. Everybody can connect in that's provisioned and start doing their specialty. So you really do have a team approach. Any questions before I move on? Okay.
Don't see any.
So this is just a really high level overview. It's Very basic. You put the server inside the environment. As we talked about, it connects up to the relay, which is in the cloud. And then the client, the user, wherever you are, the tester, just connects to the relay, and those tunnels are now connected. So that user can be anywhere. You can work from home, or you can work from the beach. I spent once an entire month in Puerto Rico working remotely. So some of the frequently asked questions we get on the commercial side, this applies mostly to open source as well. I'll point out where it doesn't. Is it secure? And I hammer this home every day. This was built by and for penetration testers. Security wasn't an add-on. Security has been developed in every step, and we take it seriously. So I know that's said by every company that we take your security and privacy seriously. We very much do. The commercial version comes with the fully encrypted root and data partitions. Both use both SSH host and TLS certificate validation. So that initial connection out by the server, it establishes a TLS connection with the relay. If they're breaking those connections to do packet inspection or any of that, it will just die. It will say, I'm no longer going to communicate. We can't override that. We recommend instead you have the client whitelist your connection. But so by default, though, it will die. If we do allow them to break it, say, okay, they are doing packet inspection, but they'll allow us through, but they are going to break that secure connection, it still does the SSH host-based authentication with fingerprint. It's already downloaded in a known good environment. And if that's tampered with, it'll drop the connection. So man in the middling those connections would be a significant feat. Everything is key-based. So even though we'll show some things that look very insecure, like VNC with trivial passwords, or accessing the Squid proxy without a password, the only way to access those is through those SSH tunnels, which you must be provisioned on with your public key. We do harden the devices. When you place this into the testing environment, we assume it's a hostile environment. That we assume that, where a lot of times a tester will come in with their laptop, they're running Kali that they've run in every other environment they've been in. So, potentially harmful files have been picked up. But they're also maybe not running with the most secure settings. Maybe they have specific services open because they like to just SSH or Netcat or something back and forth between their laptops. If you scan the TeleSploit server within that environment, there is nothing listening. It is a blank slate. All those services are only accessible via localhost through those SSH tunnels. So even though VNC is on there, even though Squid is on there, even though there's a SOX proxy you can set up, even though SSH will get into, none of that is exposed to the environment. And on the commercial side, when we get them back, we do full disk wipes, reinstalls before any equipment is redeployed for you. This is all commercial, ruggedized shipping containers. This applies to both. When it's plugged in, it auto powers on, auto connects, easy peasy. The dynamic configurations we talked about, whether through the USB, it does provide the logging encrypted on that USB, and it really is low bandwidth tolerant. I would hope that most of your customers have decent internet connectivity. But I've performed entire demos of this within for companies on site, where both the uplink from the server to the relay and my connection from the client to the relay were going through the same 4G Wi-Fi hotspot, and it worked fine. So it is very low bandwidth tolerant. And on the customer side, most likely that is not an issue, but let's say you're Duncan over there and you're on a 4G connection, you might need that.
Yeah, I would say so.
And it, yeah, and then so easy to use for the end customer on the open source version. They would just need to plug in power in the Ethernet. On the commercial one, you would add that SD card, the key that decrypts the drives. There, the step-by-step documentation. This is both for the user, that's up on the GitHub, as well as the customer who has to set it up. Really, it's step one, plug in network cable. Step two, plug in power. We also do provide a secondary wireless on the commercial version if you'd like some other niceties. But our commercial support is available through all sorts of things. And really, the whole point of this is you are sitting on your lap. It's to mirror you sitting on your laptop within that environment you're testing, but from anywhere in the world. So you have all of these services at your disposal. Next step is the demo. Any questions before we jump into that?
There's none in the Q&A, but everyone who's participating, this is a good opportunity before we get into the demo to ask any questions that you have. Just use the Q&A item in the tools control that's shown on your screen. Wirefall, the only question that I have is, what is the licensing or cost for the commercial version?
So there are two primary methods that we rent this. One is the short-term engagement. This is the most common for the majority of our customers, which is let's say a consulting company. They have a 2-week engagement somewhere. They don't want to travel, they can't travel, or they would prefer their consultants not to have to. That would be charged by day. Now, there's a lot of different variations and bells and whistles that you can add. The standard deployment is $200 per day, and if you add that together for a week-long engagement, let's say just the 5 days, that's about half of what you're probably going to charge the client for travel. You're probably looking, instead of $1,000, you're looking at $2,000 for travel. We do have clients that will tell their customers, hey, it'll cost us $2,000 to travel out there. We're willing to do it, or we can send you a box for $1,500. And the customer's like, yes, send me the box. Well, we're charging $1,000, so the customer saved money. They're happy.
Yeah.
Our client made money. They're happy. We made money. We're happy. That's all depend on you. We have an enhanced version that's a little more horsepower. That's $250 a day. That's the one you have to have if you want the Windows VM. Those Windows VMs and secondary wireless are a bit additional. But if anybody's interested, we can definitely get a hold of me, and I'll get you a hold of our business guy, because he handles that. I get to just play.
Excellent. That's just reaching out to you on Twitter, or
that, or I'm Dustin at TeleSploit.com, so just doxed myself. But either way, the second way we offer it is more for enterprises, and that's a yearly, and that's definitely much more variable. But that's where the organization, let's say, wants to use it the entire year because they have multiple sites or subsidiaries, and then they become responsible for shipping the box around. So we just provide the connectivity and updates.
Okay. We do have a couple other questions in the Q&A, and Phil, if you want to jump in, feel free, or I'll ask them.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. All right. And I'll just jump in here and run with it then. So there is a question, what hardware do you send out on the commercial side? I think they're looking for some more specifics for compute power.
Sure. Yeah. So the basic model is we are standardized on the Nook platform. We started out initially on a MIP box A10. It was not a robust platform. We quickly migrated away from that to it's an Intel NUC platform. The basic model is an i3, 4 gigs of RAM with a 500 gig hard drive. The enhanced is an i5 with 8 gigs and a 1 terabyte drive, and that's the reason really that you need the enhanced version to have the Windows VM is because of the 8 gigs of RAM. So you want to assign Windows at least 4 of those.
Yep, and that's exactly what I run CyberSpeaks Live off of, the exact same configuration. So
they're great form factors, absolutely wonderful form factors.
Yep, and it does take a bit of upgrading, from standard stuff, but that's exactly what I got, and it's running audio, video, all that stuff on a Windows, install. So I would imagine it performs pretty well for you guys as well. So the next question is, out of a day/week engagement, how many hours are actually spent on the box?
That would be 100% up to our customer, whoever is renting it from us. It's available 24/7. It's connected to the relay. So maybe a little bit more about it, since the questions are on the commercial side. When we get the request, we're told where it needs to be, who our contact is there, and like I said, who needs provisioned on the device. We make sure that the device is on site the week prior, so we can have connectivity testing. The shipping time and that lead time is not charged. We charge starting day one of when you said you needed it on site. And then that charge continues until you tell us we're done. At that point, we turn off the relay, so there's no additional connectivity. And then there's a grace period to have it returned. If it's not returned after that time, which we have not had that issue, there would be additional charges. But so it's just the time from start to finish, none of the pre or post time.
Excellent. It looks like that's answered the question. So we're done with the open ones in the Q&A.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I'm going to share my full desktop now so we can jump around a bit. What I'm going to demonstrate first is I have one system that's already set up that has was configured with all of the TeleSploit Open Source scripts located in the GitHub. But first, let's so TeleSploit. There's the site. Here's the GitHub. It's just /TeleSploit. And you have the server, relay, and client, as well as some documentation. The documentation was written for the commercial version, but it applies to the open source version. Just one of the differences will be port numberings. As I said, in the commercial version, it's assigned by deployment. In this one, they're static. So that's where you can get the files from. Oh, I don't want you to drop down there. Okay, can I get over here? Sorry, the tab for sharing is dropping down on me. A couple of things. The first thing we'll do is we'll be setting up the relay when we get to that part. But if you don't have a Kali install, you'll want to install Kali. You can get that from kali.org with the basic Kali Linux 64-bit installer. This is the 2020.1. I guess they've added an A since. That will be your server. I mentioned it does support Raspberry Pis, so you can get that from the actual offensive security site. And then I would recommend highly, one of the advantages to this is, I said we wipe the boxes, we re-image. You don't want to be setting up Kali every single time. You don't, even if you streamline it and do answers, it's still a more tedious issue than setting up a gold image and using something like we use FOG, Free Open Source Ghost, I think was their original term. And so once you have a gold image set up on your device, you Pixie boot, network boot, and capture that device on your fog server, capture the image. And then after you've tried TeleSploit Open Source, let's say you mess things up and it doesn't work anymore, well, you just re-image back down to where you were previously. I would recommend with larger drives, let's say you have a terabyte drive, instead of doing the Kali full disk, do a manual install and limit that your install footprint to a max of like 64 gig. You can always mount the rest of that as like a data partition. Because if you do the install over the full terabyte, you're going to be backing up a terabyte over your network. The 64 gig, you can go back and forth in just a couple minutes. Very nice. With that said, I do have a service already set up. As you can see, Zoom is killing my Xorg. This is how easy it is to, okay, we don't have those, how easy it is to, once everything is configured, how easy it is to use. So we've already run the setup scripts. We just want to, yeah, I'm going to have to authenticate here. Like I said, I take security seriously and eat my own dog food. That's using the YubiKey dual factor authentication. Okay, and I actually may not need it because I have authenticated recently here, and so it may be in my cache. But we're going to create the tunnels. This will create the tunnels from our client to the relay. The server is already online. Done. And now we have a script that will basically give you an SSH console on it. You can run any of your preferred SSH clients. You just point, instead of to port 22 on some remote host, you're pointing it to localhost because you built these tunnels to the relay. And these are all standard. The open source is, so it'll always be the same port, 1401. And there, we are on that device. And so if you look at its configuration file, these are the tunnels that it's building. I mentioned 1400. That pipes to its SSH server. It's also going to, it's being able to go to the IRC and the Mattermost over these ports. VNC will be on 1401. As you can see, 1401 goes to 5901, default VNC. RDP here will only, in the open source version, unless you set up your own virtual box with your own Windows install, it'll just, this tunnel will exist but won't be used. That would be to RDP. The SQUID server is on 1403. That's your default SQUID port. And then I mentioned the SOX proxy will create just a random port, 999 here, and here is where you would actually set this up. So you'd need a target. You'd need to know, let's say, the database, IP and port number that you wanted, and then you would start the SOX proxy so that you can connect to it remotely. But we're on this box now, where we have SSH access. What does that provide us? Anything you can do through that. But if you're a graphical person, you can connect graphically now that you've built those tunnels. So this, if you look at it over here, it says its server that it's trying to connect to is 127.0.0.1 here on my laptop. But it's port 14001. That's that VNC tunnel we built. So even though we're connecting to a device that has an IP address of 10.10.50.218, we're connecting to it through our local host because we built the tunnels to the relay. This device built its reverse tunnels to the relay, and we're accessing it through there. You can use your favorite SFTP client, connect and get access to the files. I mentioned the Squid proxy. So to use that here locally on my laptop, I would configure, I use Foxy Proxy just because it's very easy. And so for the open source here, we'll edit it. You're saying use the proxy on 127.0.0.1, port 14003. That was the tunnel that we created to connect to Squid. And so you're telling Firefox now to, my proxy is here locally at this port, which it sends all the information there, but that information now goes through the tunnels, through the relay, to the server, to that Squid proxy, and so it's now going out. One of the things this allows you to access as well, because the services running on the relay were only accessible to SSH, those with SSH credentials that have authenticated. We can now access those services that are on the relay, not just on the server. One of those services is, as I mentioned, Mattermost. So we've set up a Pwn School Mattermost. Here you can collaborate, just like Slack, with all the other people who have been provisioned on the relay. IRC, same thing. If we look at it, the configuration is localhost, this 127.0.0.1 on my laptop, with that port that is now tunneling to the relay. So if we close that, we can connect and go ahead and join Pwn School. So now anybody provisioned on the relay, we can communicate with via IRC. Or you can be inventive and create those things on the server that will communicate, like dump messages into different chat rooms based on what service or what's the status of what scan is going on. You can get real creative there. So this looks just like you're sitting at sitting in the environment, right? And so that's basically what it was designed to do. That is TeleSploit, both open source and commercial. You're using the services as if you were sitting there. So this doesn't look impressive because, yeah, sure I can SSH, sure I can VNC, sure I can, use a web I can access web applications in the environment, but you're not sitting there. You're now in Tahiti or in home isolation, whichever is the case. So I really think that's one of the reasons I was really happy that we were able to do this is I've been seeing a lot of stories, a lot of people saying we're getting a lot of interest on the commercial side that we have engagements we've sold and we can't service them because we can't travel. Or the customers now are saying, do not send your people. We want people to work. And great, if you want to talk to us commercially, we'll handle everything. But if you're a one-person shop or a very small shop, download this, and hopefully we can keep you working because that's what's going to get us all through this. Now, to show you how easy this is, I am going to do a live demo of setting up all three pieces. With the new code base that is up there on GitHub, this has been tested exactly once. So let's roll the dice. Any questions before we go there?
Yeah, Wirefall. Right. We got a couple in the queue, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
So before I ask the question, Ian Hart says, this is a really great idea. Can't believe he hadn't heard of this before. Good stuff, guys. So a little bit of praise there. The question that we have, Kazuki Dev is asking, do you know if it's possible if it'll work with Parrot as well if you don't want to use Kali?
Sure. And it has not been tested on that specifically, but the primary requirements are get ready to boo. System D. It does use the network monitor command line and some System D services because you do set up services. We'll go through that. But otherwise, you know, you should be able to get it working on just about anything that at least offers network manager command line and the ability to run services with system control.
Perfect. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. And Ian, this isn't the only solution out there. Thank you for the praise, but I know just in the past week or two that Dave Kennedy, Trusted Sec, released a remote pen test solution, open source. I'm not sure if it's on GitHub or their own repository. And there's a number of others. Really, like most of the pen test organizations, larger ones, will have a solution. Really, our focus was, you know, let's say Rapid7 has their own solution. They have a remote pen test solution. They can do internal pen tests remotely. I don't know the robustness of it. I'm not privy to that. But if you engage them to do a test, you have to use their people. They have that remote internal pen test solution, but it means it comes with their people. And I'm not saying their people are bad at all, but let's say you want to use your own people, or you have a pen test firm that you're comfortable with, a local one that you have an established relationship with, but they don't have a remote solution. It was really to divest those two from it. It's just a platform. It's agnostic. Use this and use whoever you like from wherever you like. It can be Boston, Boise, Bangalore. You know, we don't care. We provision an SSH key. Okay.
I like that.
So step one, everything will be communicating with the relay. Therefore, that's what we're going to set up first. I said, you know, if you don't have a Kali box, go ahead and start that up because it's going to take a while to run. But the first thing that we need to have in place, oh, great. There we go. Okay. Is an AWS instance. So set up a special one here for Pwn School. Now, when you register, if you haven't set up an AWS account before, you should be able to get a year free of their smallest one. The smallest instance will be enough to run your relay. It will likely not run Mattermost. Mattermost does recommend 2 gig or more. The smallest one is 512 meg, but everything else it would run. So you can definitely use that free for a year if you haven't taken advantage of that already. And let's see, we're going to copy the username, Pwn School, and copy the password. Oh, dang it. I hate these things. Okay, cool. Now this is the AWS Management Console. Like I said, you can use DigitalOcean or whatever you like. You know, it's been tested on Ubuntu 18.04. Go ahead and use what you like. I'm going to show you a little secret if you're not already privy to this. You know, AWS can get very complicated. They have an AWS for Dummies called Lightsail. So once you're logged in, just lightsail.aws.amazon.com, and it will give you this very, very simple interface. So right now we have 2 running. Test is everything we were just running on, showing all of the demo. Pwn School is what we're going to be setting up. But we're going to do a really quick, I'm going to show you really quick how you would create on AWS Lightsail, create one of these instances. And then we'll go into Pwn School and we'll actually, since it's already set up, we'll go in and run it, basically customize it for TeleSploit. But it's as easy as this. You create an instance. We want Linux, Unix. We want the OS only, and Ubuntu. Now, the first time you log in, How are you going to authenticate to your this instance? This is all SSH key based as well. So it's not very intuitive. It says you are using the default SSH key pair. Well, but I don't have a default key pair. When you create the account, this is all you get. So click on Change SSH key pair. We're using the default. You can create a new one, so you can create a new one for every single one, or you can use the same for all of them. We're using default. Here you can download it. One thing that may give you an issue when you download it is that the permissions will not be right. They'll be too open. By default, when I download it, it's like 0644. You need to make it 0600. So change your permissions on that to that. And by default, it doesn't have a password. So I would recommend running ssh-keygen-p for give it a password, -f, which is the file, and give it this whatever you downloaded. Then you can add a password to it. Like I said, here's the smallest. It says free first month. We're going to go ahead and, well, actually I'm just showing you, so let's go ahead and create the free. We're not going to actually use this. And then identify your instance and create. This creates one. Right now it's starting it up. You see the IP address here. What it gives you when you first create an instance is, you could almost think of it, it's sticky, but it's really a DHCP type of address. This could potentially change. Let's say you shut down your instance for a while, turn it back on, it changes. Well, if you create a DNS record for your domain, your fully qualified domain name with this IP, and that changes, everything's going to break. So what we'll want to do once this comes up, there it's up. So click on it. Want to go to networking, and right here create static IP. So this is going to let you create a static IP. It'll look at all your instances that don't have static IPs and let you pick one. This is the only one right now that doesn't. Do it live, and then name it. And my just standard is you can't do. It will not allow you to name the IP the same as any instance, but you can just do that and -IP. That way you know what's assigned to what. Create, and now we have a completely different. Before we were 54 something. Now we're 3.230. So it's now been assigned to that. The other thing you will need to do before running the scripts, and it's in the documentation, is, let's go to networking here. By default, Lightsail opens up SSH to the internet and HTTP. Now we do need, although we're not going to run HTTP, the only HTTP server is going to be listening on localhost on the relay. We need it open when we do the Let's Encrypt certificate. It will set up a standalone server real quickly to do a challenge, make sure you own the domain that you're trying to register. So we need that open now. But we will be communicating over 443. Like I said, we build the tunnels over TLS. So we need HTTPS. We save that, and it's that easy. Now we go in, we run our setup script. We're done. Then you would come back in here because HTTP is no longer required. It will only be required when you renew your certificate every 90 days from Let's Encrypt. You can leave it up. Nothing's listening, but I would recommend going back in here and just deleting it. So now you only have SSH and HTTPS. Okay, well, we're going to kill that because we no longer need it. And we're going to set up Pwn School. Now, they do have a console here you can access. It's browser-based. It will disconnect constantly. At least that's my experience. So I would definitely recommend going in and connecting by command line. So as you see here, I've already set up, I've already downloaded the SSH key. I called it pwnschool.pem. And we're connecting to Ubuntu at test.telesploit.com. If you, let's actually do that. Ping. You see it's 5483. We'll look at the last octet here, 246. Sorry, that was test. Pwn school. We're going to do Pwn school. Oh, because I'm on it. Sorry, I picked the only one that I'm actually on this server there. Okay, it's 3.210. We'll look at the last octet, 16, and you can tell this is Pwn school. So I'm glad I caught that, or I would have been making a mistake here. Is we no longer want to go to test, we want to go to Pwn school. We're going to set up the Pwn school relay. Have to enter the passphrase. So we're on the server. Go into it. We need to run. We don't necessarily need to run the git as root, but we want it to be en route to where we put the files. So if you look at TeleSploit server repository, it will tell you the things you need to know. I'm sorry, not server. We're going on to relay first. It'll be Ubuntu 18.04. I've already created this, that address you saw. That's why I was able to ping it. I've done this ahead of time because it can take DNS a while to propagate. So there's an A record for pwnschool.telesploit.com. 2280 and 443 are open. That was already set up. And then from the server, all we have to do is clone this repository. I know we're getting here on time, so try to hurry this along. We clone it, and then all we have to do is enter that and run the relay setup. It will ask us the question saying, hey, are you sure you're running as root, you've opened all those ports, and that you've done an upgrade? I'm pretty sure I did that beforehand, so we shouldn't see all those upgrades. And that the fully qualified domain name resolves whatever we're choosing. We're going to name this Pwn School. Control-C. Pwn School dot. We can see that, yes, it does resolve to the IP address we expected. You need to enter an IP email for Let's Encrypt. This just warns you when your 90 days are coming up, so you can re-up your certificate. Now we have a couple passwords. MySQL, this is going to be used for the Mattermost server. It holds the database for all of your conversations. And the user that it will use to authenticate to that. Okay, so this is certbot. This is what sets up your Let's Encrypt, if you haven't used that before. I'll take a minute here to... Then we should come back with that it is setting up a server to launch the challenge, and then we should get that back. You know what? I may not have done the update and upgrade. Okay. Restart services, yes. Okay, well that's running. We can go ahead and look at the server portion. Now, there is one thing I need to bring up on the server that if I put this in my notes here. So on the relay, all you have to do is pull that, run the script. On the server, there is a change between old Kali and the new 2020.1a or whatever. It used to be you always ran as root on Kali, root Tor, everyone knew. By default now, it requires you to create an unprivileged user, and root is locked. So you can upgrade your local user to a basically super user where it's not asked for passwords to use privileged commands by installing and doing a deep package -reconfigure Kali-grant-root. But we're going to bypass all of that and just from the Kali server where that you just set up, go into a command and just type sudo password root and enter a password. Root is now activated. And we're going to do all of this from the root account. Let's see. How are we sitting here? Yeah, I know it pops up another warning in a minute. Any questions while this is, there we go, keep the locally installed version.
Actually, we do have a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure. Great time for it.
Yeah, so Phil, this one's directed towards you. Will this video be available afterwards? I noticed that we are recording and someone is asking.
Yeah, as long as that's okay with Wirefall. Is it okay to post the recording?
Absolutely.
Okay. So
absolutely.
Perfect. And then one from earlier, and I apologize, I didn't catch it, who asked the question, but it was during the PowerPoint presentation that you were doing. How did you find the Pi 2 configuration? Was it easy, fast to set up, etc.?
Pi 2 specifically?
Yeah, that's how it's put in. I thought you had mentioned it was on a Pi 4.
Yeah, Pi 4. Yeah, yes.
Yeah.
I've run it on a Pi. I've run on Pi 3 and Pi 4. Well, Pi 3 Plus and a Pi 4. I have not with a Pi 2. One of the surprises, and this was from preparing for the North Texas ISSA conference training, was my plan was to Pixie boot, network boot all of the different all 75 of the different Raspberry Pis and pull down unique images based on Mac, do some stuff. They said it was on the chart and maybe it's already supported now, but at the time they did not support USB or Pixie boot on the Pi 4. I don't know how you release something without that. You had to image a micro SD and put it in. That's the only way you could boot. So hopefully that's changed.
Yeah, because that sucks.
Yeah. I had several Anchor 16-port replicators with tails plugged in that had SD card with the adapter and just a regular micro SD plugged in, and did a DV with T to 70-some different devices.
Oh my God, what a mess.
Okay, so we were successful. We've installed the certificate. We can move on here on our relay. And now it's how it brokers these connections is with HA proxy, which basically it's sitting on 443. And when you connect with a web browser, it can see that protocol and it goes, you know what, this is a web client. I'm going to shunt you down to my web server listening localhost port 80, and you will get a web page back. If you connect that you're the SSH that's encapsulated within that TLS connection, it goes, yeah, this isn't a web client, this is SSH, and it will shunt you down to the SSH host. So that's one of the unique things to the solution. and then now it installs Mattermost, it installs IRC, gets everything up and going. Reboot, complete off installation. We'll go ahead and reboot. And when it comes up, we'll move over to the server. We'll run that script, and then I'll show you the client, and we should be done. So thank you, everyone, for hanging in. I know this is going a little long.
You're fine. Don't worry about the time.
Okay, let's back up. We'll authenticate. Oh, no, we're AWS, the AWS one. Okay, so actually make this one a little smaller. Okay. So as you can see, there's really the only things listening are the Mattermost server, the IRC, port 80 on localhost, and SSH on localhost. All those are localhost. So nothing is 443 is listening outbound. Let's see. Control C. We've got so 443 is listening on everything. 22 is listening on everything, and then everything else is localhost. I'm going to run this while we go set up our server here. Now, one of the steps that I'm taking here, this is strictly because otherwise I couldn't show you, is normally I would I would plug in the device and configure it from directly, plug in the keyboard, mouse, monitor, and configure everything normally. The only step that was done that way was plugged in and did the root, enabling the root account, and then normally Kali on the Intel side doesn't enable SSH by default. On the Raspberry Pi side it does, but since we're using the Intel based, we need to do a couple of things. Because I'm going to run all this remotely. Normally I'd be standing there. I'm going to run it remotely so you can see it. We'll edit the SSH daemon configuration, and we'll change the default of commented out permit root login but prohibit password to do permit root login and yes, so we can directly access it with a password. Now, this is not a TeleSploit thing. This is just for the demonstration. Normally, we would never allow password. It would be prohibit password. And this will change when we run the script. It's going to overwrite that SSH config to permit root login, but prohibit password, so it must be a key-based authentication. Once we've made that change, we'll run the command to start the SSH server, and that's the condition is in right now. So I'm going to connect to it. That's all that's been done to it. It has not been TeleSploitified. This is the IP address. So now I'm on that box, and I'm just going to run the server setup. Now this tells you what you need to do. You need to set up the relay first, do a Kali XFCE install. That was the old 2019 days. Now XFCE is the default. You're going to update several variables in this server config file. I'll show you that. If you were standing at the device, you would insert the USB and format it and label it TeleSploit, and then just mount it, which you can right-click on the desktop icon and mount. We're going to have to do that through the command line, so I'll show you how to do those. But That's normally how you would do it. Oops, I forgot to copy. Okay, so make sure you're in the root directory. Clone it, TeleSploit server. And now we have a TeleSploit server directory. As I said, we need to update the server config with variables that match ours. So, okay, everybody start hating. Doing the nano. So for your relay fully qualified domain name, I said we're going to use Pwn School, telesploit.com. Tester public key. This will be your key that you're using to connect both to the relay and to the server. I have that copied right here. So now these other variables for me are correct. The USB drive that it'll be doing the logs and configs from are SDB1, and the network interface name is ETH0. This is so that we can accommodate some of those weird naming standards that some of the newer releases are putting out, but again, it's just wired, not wireless. I would recommend, if this were production, to change your GPG key from this. Please change me. Otherwise, everything else is fine. So now we're going to run server setup. So it says, hey, review this. Does it look good? Yes. Pwn School, that's my key. Everything there looks good. And you see all the ports, 1400, 1401. This will be the same for every TeleSploit Open Source install. That's why you can't run more than 2 at once on your client, is they'd conflict. Pro hint, you can change all those. So you can do as many as you like. It's just not automated. Okay, we're going to go ahead and go forward. Does Pwn School resolve? Yes, it does. We can go forward. Oh, I did forget something. Nice thing for error messages. It can't create this because it doesn't exist. We're going to exit out of here. We haven't done anything yet. This is where I said if I was standing in front of it, I would have taken these steps to format and mount. I got ahead of myself here. Since we're going from the console, I have to run some other commands. We're going to wipe it. So we have no residual data. Partition it. We have to label it TeleSploit or whatever. You can change that in the configuration files too. Just make sure you do it in both places. And now we're going to make the directory and then mount it. Make our mount point and then mount. And then we'll be ready. Media root incomplete copy. There we go. Okay, now we should be ready. So yes, the configs are fine. We resolve. You see it did this time set up the directories. We're going to go ahead and use DHCP. Now how am I going to connect the server to the relay? Now the options are direct TLS. This is what we recommend. So, well, if it is allowed, we recommend in that it's saying you don't have a proxy that you need to get out, but it has both security checks in place. It does the certificate check, and it does the SSH host-based verification. If they're breaking connections and you're going to get SSL errors, you can do the unsafe TLS. This is still without a proxy. The certificate checking is disabled, but it still will do the host-based, so you don't have to worry about a man in the middle in that aspect. It does support simple proxies, including basic authentication and NTLM authentication. So if you need a proxy to get out, it will support that outbound. We're going to do direct. Okay, so of course this is not going to work. It's not showing they're the same. There's a diff. Now we need to find out why real quick. We won't go too far if not. Okay. Unless somebody out there is trying to man in the middle of me. We'll try it one more time. No. Okay. So we're not going to set up. Sorry, guys. I could probably troubleshoot this with giving another 10, 15 minutes, but I know we're coming up on the hour. Once the server was created, though, let me show you real quick. I can do the client. We won't be able to connect to the server because of this issue, but I can show how easy the client is as well. I'll figure out what's going on here, and if there are any requirements to update the code on TeleSploit, I will do so. So, wait. Okay, that's where we're there. Let's go ahead and open a new terminal. So the connections I had before were to this. I was using TeleSploit client here, where we made successful connections to the test box. I'm going to go ahead and make a directory, do it live, since that's what we're doing. And we'll go into the client. And for the client, really, all you have to do is run. There's no prerequisites other than if you use the client can choose as well to use SSL TLS encapsulation. I don't recommend it if you're somewhere where SSH gets out. Use that. But if you do use that, then you have to have netcat installed, ncat, from the nmap suite. So from here, I'm just going to, didn't do the whole thing, git clone. Just done that. If we look, go into the TeleSploit client, this should look familiar. It has a Windows client, as I said, based on Kitty. We're going to use the Linux scripts from here. Now, if I ran, last time I ran create tunnels, that will fail because we haven't set it up. The last one was set up already. We need to run setup client. And it fails because it can't find this. Well, if you read, like I should, you need to update with whatever you're using. So by default, it was set to Relay OS. So we're going to do Pwn School. And that's all that we'll need changed here. Okay, and now we see Pwn School does resolve. What server, Zoom chats in my way, I can't see. We're going to use this key here. As I said, this is the same as on the server, except we have an added option of just direct SSH. I'm going to go direct SSH outbound for my client because it's possible. And see here, we're getting that the files are identical, which is what we expect. And we can proceed. Okay. Now we should be able to run those to at least connect to the relay. If the tunnels were already set up for that test, and since this is open source, it's using the same ones, so we have to kill those first before we can create the new tunnels. Oh. Oops. Really quick. Okay, here we're... Okay. Since this is all SSH key based, we need to give it the key, the public key for the key we just entered here for our client. And to do that, we use TeleSploit Open Source, but we want the public key this time. Okay. And now we should be able to create our tunnels, which it just did. The next thing would be run console, so we get the console just like the test, but for some reason that is not, this server is not setting up. Let's see, that's that one. Let's go back to the server, Control C. Real quick, see if we can figure out what it's doing. DHCP, you say direct, we enter the IP address. I gotta make this smaller so I can't read. Okay. diff.ssh test is trusted. Let's try it one more time. Okay. PwnSchool.telesploit. That's all that should be changed. It is. No. And it's not writing them either. Okay, well, one part failure on here. We did not get the server up. That would be the last piece. It would connect to the relay, and then the setup would be complete. Not sure why it's saying that it's not trusted unless there is a some sort of man-in-the-middle attack, but I was able to get it from my client, so I suspect not. And we are on the same network, so that's why that would be odd.
And this has been demoed exactly one time, right?
Yeah, this code has been, that test environment was the first test, and it worked.
Yeah.
So the live version did not.
Did you sacrifice the chicken to the demo gods?
No, due to the current situation, chickens were unavailable.
Yeah, I hear you. Having a little difficulty getting them moved around. So let me ask a question, just to kind of cover some ground here. So the AWS requirement, are there any plans roadmap-wise for supporting other cloud platforms like Azure or Google?
It should be completely agnostic. How you set it up would be unique to their environment, but it's just relying on an instance of Ubuntu 18.04 at this point. It could probably work with other instances. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you want DigitalOcean to do a drop in DigitalOcean, or use Azure or the Google Compute, that should be just fine.
Perfect. I guess I misunderstood that in the beginning.
All right. Well, if people aren't asleep, any other questions?
I'm not seeing any more in the Q&A, but guys, this is your chance. You know, got a legend here on the line, getting some comments. 68 you know, thanking you for the demo, the great information. Victor's asking, are you seeing more and more business by using this? I think that's fairly easy one to answer.
I think our commercial side, we're definitely seeing more interest in the platform because of the limitation of travel right now. There's been a significant uptick in that. But as far as from a single practitioner, you know, if you were using TeleSploit Open Source, I think it definitely can open you up to other opportunities that, you know, maybe you're not ready to go full time and you just want to do a side hustle, which is fine for external penetration tests. You can do that at night after work, or, you know, work around the hours but on site has been problematic because you still have to go to day job. This would allow you to get more work by being able to also do internals while maintaining a full-time day job if that was required.
Yeah, that's an interesting approach. Dude, you have so many praises here in chat. I think it's just worthy for Phil to be able to send you that after the broadcast. One question that Pony Lover, I like how he spells this. But anyhow, can we ask you other stuff via Twitter?
Absolutely. My DMs are open. Please reach out. I do quite a bit in the community as well as mostly of my mentoring is I know people. I don't know a lot anymore, it seems like, but I know a lot of people who know a lot of things, so I can at least get you in touch with somebody.
Yep. That's a secret sauce right there, is surround yourself with really intelligent people, right? So Phil, I'll give it back to you. I think we're done with the Q&A.
Well, thanks Wirefall for demoing this for us and doing this awesome presentation. And thanks for Duncan for stepping in and co-hosting. Made it a little more fun tonight. So good to see more people involved. We had a really great turnout. A lot of people from the community we know and people from other countries. So this has been great. Thanks again, Wirefall. And thanks everyone for joining. We'll continue virtually as always. We stream our talks, but as far as local, we'll continue to do virtual only until things are safe from the virus. So thanks for everyone joining, and maybe we'll do things more frequent now since, you know, it's kind of cut down on people's availability of meetups and conferences to go to.